everybody! Summer is winding down, and that means that hunting season is coming up quick. And sometimes when I'm out there freezing my butt off in the pouring rain, it's nice to have a reminder of why I'm doing it. So, when I'm fishing for salmon, I like to eat smoked salmon, and when I'm hunting for deer, I like to eat deer jerky. So today, I'm making this simple and delicious venison jerky that everyone's gonna love. So let's get started. So I've got some odds and ends left over from the last couple of hunting seasons. Now, the first thing I'm going to need to do is get these trimmed up, clear off all the silver skin, any fat, and then chunk these up into nice jerky-sized nuggets. Now here is something very interesting. Take a look at these two pieces of meat. Both are from last year. This one I cut and wrapped at home. This one was done professionally at a local butcher shop. Now take a look at the difference between these two. This one looks dead fresh, and this one just looks kind of dead. There's going to be a lot more trim on this one, a lot more waste, and this one's going to be pretty much 100% usable. So, the way you wrap your meat before you freeze it is very important. And I use a layer of plastic wrap, sometimes a double layer of plastic wrap, and then I wrap it up in freezer paper, tape it all up, and that keeps the stuff good for 3 years at least. This one was just thrown into the butcher paper and then into the freezer. And I mean, the difference is stark. So, I'm gonna get to work trimming these up, and then we'll look at our brine. That's just a shame. There's really almost no silver skin or anything on this. This is just pure meat. But not gonna be tasty, so it's getting pitched. Alright. Nice thin sharp knife. Trying to get all that silver skin off. This meat's still partially frozen, which will make it nice and easy to cube up once I get it trimmed here. You cut your jerky how you like. I'm going for nice nuggets rather than strips this time. Some dank deer nuggets. Now I've got my beautiful clean venison chunks here, and I've gone with some pretty good sized nuggets. These are probably 2 inches long by a 1/2 inch thick by a 1/2 inch wide. Should be a couple of big bites on each of those. So now let's get into brining / curing the meat. And there are plenty of ways to do it, but I like to use the equilibrium method because it gives me nice, consistent results. And in a nutshell, the equilibrium method just means that you're going to weigh all your ingredients and then assign them percentages so you know exactly how much to use no matter how much meat you have. And it's actually very simple to do. And I don't always use the equilibrium method. I'll sometimes just haphazardly throw a bunch of stuff together and I can make a pretty good batch of jerky that way. But using this technique, I'll at least know how salty and sweet my jerky is gonna be, and then I can layer flavorings on afterwards. So let's get into it, and to begin, I have weighed the meat and I've gone with 5 pounds because it's kind of a nice round number to use. But to use this method, I'm gonna break everything down into grams because pounds and math just do not work well together. So this 5 pounds of meat weighs 2,280 grams. And I'm gonna add 1 cup of water. We'll call that 250 grams. I just want a little something to help dissolve the other ingredients. You can actually leave it out if you want to, but you might need to stir everything more and a little more frequently during the brining. So the total weight of the meat in the water ends up being 2,530 grams, and that is the number that I'll use to figure the percentage of salt and sugar and cure, which is optional. We'll get to that in a bit. Now for the salt content on jerky, I like to keep it between 2 and 3%, usually a little toward the lower end. 3% is quite salty and it'll bite you pretty good, but if you got a really salted palate and that's what you like, that's probably what you're gonna wanna go for. Also, if you like a very sweet jerky and you're gonna add a lot of sugar, then you can actually get away with adding more salt and they kind of balance each other out. So for this recipe, I'm gonna start at 2.25%. So using the total weight of the meat and the water, 2,530 grams, I'll just multiply that by 2.25% and I end up with 57 grams of salt, and that happens to be 3 tablespoons of this coarse kosher salt. And I'll just get that right into the water. Now, sugar content, I like it anywhere from 0 all the way up to 10 or even 12% on some of those really sweet jerkies, kind of like the store-bought jerkies. They're very high. And on this one, I'm gonna go fairly high at 7% because I've used some of the tougher cuts in here, and sugar is a natural tenderizer. Again, I'm gonna use the total weight of this, 2,530 grams multiplied by 7%, and I get 177 grams of sugar, and I am using brown sugar today because if I don't, I guarantee you someone in the comments is gonna tell me I should have, even though it's not gonna make much of a difference at all at this point. The difference in flavoring in your brine when you use brown sugar or white sugar is so negligible, I don't know if anybody could actually detect it. But if you do want brown sugar flavor, I'm gonna show you how to get more of that later. So, my 177 grams of brown sugar happens to be about 1 cup of solidly packed brown sugar and about 3/4 of a cup of white sugar if that's what you're using. Down into the water. And now we can talk about flavoring this jerky, and this is where I used to have a lot of trouble way back in the day of when I was trying to get a particular flavor. I'd add everything into the brine, and the brine would taste like I wanted the jerky to taste, and then I get the jerky done and it was nothing like I thought it should be. And the reason for that is that a lot of the ingredients that I was putting in the brine didn't have water-soluble flavors. Like many of the spices, I would always try to get a red hot jerky, and I would load the brine up with all kinds of habaneros, Carolina Reapers, cayenne, you name it. It would get spicy, but it would never blow my lid off like I wanted. And that's because that capsaicin in there doesn't break down in the water, it doesn't get into the jerky. So the only heat I was getting was what had stuck to the outside of the jerky. And I did get pretty good results like that, but it was not what I was looking for. So into my brine, I'm mainly gonna use water-soluble flavorings. Soy sauce. This has got a lot of water-soluble flavoring that's gonna penetrate all the way through your jerky meat. So I'm gonna go into here with 40 milliliters, that's 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. Worcestershire sauce also has a lot of flavor that can get into and through your meat. There's some acidity here, some sweetness. It's got a really complex flavor and it goes great with red meat. So 60 milliliters, that is 1/4 cup of Worcestershire sauce. Garlic has both water soluble and oil soluble flavors, so I'm gonna add in a teaspoon of garlic powder. You could add in a bunch of fresh crushed up garlic and that's gonna work just fine. And my final flavoring is gonna be some liquid smoke because I'm gonna dehydrate this. I'm not gonna put it in the smoker, and I'm gonna add just about a teaspoon of this liquid smoke to the brine. And you can actually add this post-brining and get the same result. Now, this brand of liquid smoke is very, very strongly flavored, so yeah, that 1 teaspoon is probably gonna get the job done, but I've had other brands that it would take 5 or 10 times that much, so know your liquid smoke. Give that a good smell. If it smells nice and smoky, you're probably good to go. Now, let me give that a quick taste. That's very nice. And that is just my base flavoring, but all of that flavor is gonna get into the meat. As far as other seasoning, that I'm gonna add post-brine, and it's gonna be a coating on there, and I'm gonna get a lot more of the flavor I want doing it that way. So now, let's talk about the cure. And this is 100% optional. I'm talking about pink curing salt, #1. This is a preservative. It does impart a certain flavor on your meat and a texture, and it preserves that real red color. I like to use it a lot, but if you don't want to use it, you can absolutely leave it out and you're still gonna have great jerky. Now, to figure the amount of cure, I need to take the total of the meat, the water, and all these other ingredients and multiply that by 0.25%. So if I've done my math right, the total weight of the meat and all these brine ingredients is 2,864 grams. I will multiply that by 0.25%, and that gives me 7.2 grams of pink cure #1. Make sure you're using cure #1, and you do want to be accurate with your cure measurement. And this 7 grams happens to be 1 teaspoon. So I'll get that into the brine. Make sure you've tasted your brine and have it locked in where you want it before adding the cure, because tasting now is a no-no until it's done its job on this meat. All right, so we're gonna cure this in a bag. Now I get my brine right down into there. Nice. Get the air out of there. That's good. Let's get everybody nice and coated. Now, if you want to put a bunch of spices in your brine, you go right ahead. Don't think I'm out here telling you not to. It's your meat, you jerk it how you like. I'm just saying that those spices that are not water soluble, you're mainly getting flavors from what sticks to the outside of the meat, and for that reason, I just put them in after they come out of the brine. This is a very basic brine that I've got here, but there are plenty of ingredients that you can add to your brine that will penetrate and get through the meat. Anything acidic like a vinegar or some fruit juices, Fish sauce will get in there and penetrate really good. Ginger, very good, but ginger can also really break your meat apart, so be careful with that one if you're using fresh ginger. It's just one of those things that's fun to play around with and dial in the way you see fit. And now this goes out into the refrigerator to let that cure work its magic. These are pretty good sized chunks of meat, so I'm gonna give this a solid 24 hours. But that time, of course, is gonna depend on the girth of your meat. Thin strips, an overnight soak in this, and you're gonna be ready to go. So we will be back here in the morning to finish jerking this meat. All right, it's been a day. My meat should be thoroughly cured by now, and I did take this out a couple of times, massaged my sack really good, flipped it over here and there, and made sure that that solution got really thoroughly worked through the meat. And now I want to drain off any of the extra liquid that's on there. And there's not going to be a whole bunch because I didn't put a whole bunch in there. I will just shake that up a little bit. And I'll let that drain for 10 or 15 minutes. And then we'll season this up and get it drying. Now I've got my nice drained meat chunks here, and now is the time when you can really stack this with a lot of flavor. And you can go as simple or get as creative as you like with your toppings. Some simple options would just be to put in a bunch of your favorite barbecue sauce. I like to use just a bunch of honey sometimes, or sriracha. You know, a really good thing I do is sometimes a bunch of Asian sweet chili sauce. That makes for a really nice jerky topping. You may have a favorite seasoning salt that you want to put in there. Of course, keep in mind when you're putting together your brine that you're going to be adding some salt on top of that later if that's the route you're going to go. And of course, any spice blend that you want to mix up of your own to create your own unique flavor. I'm going to keep this one very simple today, and now is the time where if you do add that brown sugar, it's going to make much more of a difference than when you add it into the brine. So I'm just going to throw in a couple of handfuls of brown sugar. I don't really measure it right now. I just kind of get everything nice and coated at this point. And I love black pepper on jerky, so I'm going to grind up a bunch of peppercorns, and we're going to throw that in there. Yeah, I'd probably be better off smacking these with my hammer. I just dropped and broke my trusty pepper mill. I don't want anything too huge in here. Why not? Lots of black pepper for me. And now we'll get in there. Just toss that all around. And as that dries out, the sugar and that pepper is just gonna weld itself to the meat and give you a real nice top coat. Once everything is nice and evenly coated, we're ready to take it to the racks. Now you could finish your jerky in the smoker or in the dehydrator or even in the oven. The key is keeping that temperature nice and low. I prefer the texture of a dried jerky to a cooked jerky, and doing that in the dehydrator is the easiest for me because I can keep the temperature down nice and low and it stays consistent and I don't need to worry about it at all. I can just pop it in there, go about my chores, and I rarely need to check on it. Whereas my smoker, to get those low temperatures, I gotta crack the door, I gotta go out there and check as the weather changes outside or it gets a little windy, a little sunny. Yeah, it's constant fiddling with it, but it does make very good jerky. It's just a lot more effort. For the dehydrator, I'm just gonna hit my dehydrator racks with a little bit of cooking spray. And we'll flop this jerky on here. Want to keep them spread out so they're not touching. Want good circulation between all these chunks. And some pretty chunky chunks. I think these are going to be the thickest I've ever done in my dehydrator, so we're going to see how long these take. get this out and into the dehydrator. Ooh, isn't that looking good? Oh, we get that down into the dehydrator. And I'm gonna crank this all the way up for those big chunks, and that's 155 degrees Fahrenheit. And these big guys, I'm guessing, are gonna take at least 8 hours to finish. I'll start checking them at about 6 hours. Just give them a little taste test. And don't worry if you're taste testing your jerky and it's a little undercooked, it's all cured, perfectly safe, you're not gonna get sick. So now, I'm just gonna go about fixing the deck, and we'll come back and check on these later. Alright. We're about 7 hours in. So let's take a look at what we got here. Ooh, that is looking good. Let's try this out. Beautiful color on there. Ooh, inside and out. Very nice. Now this one's getting pretty close to where I like it. Of course, you can dry yours out as far as you like. Less dry is going to be more tender, of course, and more dry is not going to be as tender, but it's going to be preserved for a lot longer. So, just stop it wherever you like it. And actually, what I like to do, because there is going to be some carryover cooking, is to test it out, and then when it is just about where I like it, that's where I'll shut things down, and as that cools off, it'll end up being exactly how I want it. And what I do with the dehydrator is right when it gets to that point where I'm ready to shut it off, I'll actually just turn the dehydrator all the way down, essentially turning it into a fan, and I'll let it cool that way for about an hour. Then I'll put it into a container, and I'll put that container into the fridge, uncovered overnight, and let that finish drying out. So that's what I'll do with this, and then we will try this out in the morning. Now, let's see how we did. Ooh, take a look at that. Now, let's get a look at the inside of one of these chunks. Oh yeah. The cure has kept that nice red color all the way through the jerky. It looks great, smells great. Of course, what really matters is the taste. Check out that bite. Oh yeah. These are some dank nugs. Great color, great flavor. I just love a black pepper jerky. It's got a really nice chew to it, but it isn't tough. That's not to say that you're not going to need a toothpick after eating a bunch of this, but you're not going to sit there and chew and chew and chew. This is a very high quality deer jerky. And the basic flavor is great, but it's just a starting point for a multitude of delicious jerky flavors. I got a bunch of work to do around here before the months of Pacific Northwest rain set in. I've got to get all my summer gear stowed, shut down the garden and do my canning, and just kind of get everything in order so I can get out and play all through the fall. There's definitely a different chill in the air in the mornings now, and as soon as I start to see a bit of fog on the ground, I'm gonna be absolutely frothing to get out there. Ah, it's close enough I can almost taste it. Oh, wait. There it is. And if you really want to taste it, give this one a try, and I know you're gonna love it. Thanks for watching.